Once, in a time when ink was more powerful than the sword, a civilization rose where knowledge became sacred, and scholars were revered like saints. Welcome to Uncover Time, where we explore the turning points of civilization and follow the seekers, scribes, and scholars who built a world from words and preserved the light of learning for generations to come. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had said, "Seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave, and the ink of the scholar is more sacred than the blood of the martyr." And these words echoed across generations, becoming more than sayings. They became a cultural code that bound hearts to books, souls to study, and turned learning into an act of worship. When the Arabs encountered Greek culture in Syria, it was like a spark meeting dry parchment. Curiosity ignited across the Islamic world, and soon the scholar stood beside the poet as a pillar of honor. From the moment a Muslim child could speak, education began. The first words were a testimony of faith, and soon after came the rhythm of memorization, the discipline of learning, and the light of understanding. At the age of 6, many boys and some girls entered simple schools, often held in mosques or courtyards, where tuition was free or nearly so, and the lessons revolved around prayers, reading, and above all, the Quran. Each day, a part of the Quran was committed to memory and recited aloud. To master the entire book was the goal. Those who succeeded were honored with the title Hafiz, the holder of divine words. Education was not easy. The method was memorization, and the discipline was often the rod. Yet behind every repetition lay the belief that sacred knowledge would shape a sacred soul. The highest form of early education was not just to read or recite, but to embody the character of truth, kindness, and discipline. And those who mastered writing, archery, and swimming earned the title Al-Kamil, the perfect one. As children grew, so did the depth of their learning, leaning against the cool stone of mosque pillars. Young minds listened to scholars explain hadith, law, and theology, absorbing a world through words. In time, these informal lessons evolved into formal colleges called madrasas, where not only religion, but also grammar, mathematics, astronomy, and logic were taught, and all in the rich, unifying language of Arabic. In the madrasas, tuition was free, and generous patrons often paid for both professors and students, so that the door to knowledge stood open not just to the wealthy, but to all who hungered for learning. More than books, it was the teachers who shaped the soul. Students traveled vast distances to sit at the feet of wise scholars. Journeying from Mecca to Damascus, from Baghdad to Cairo, seeking minds that could awaken their own, no diplomas were given. What mattered was the certificate of personal approval from a respected scholar, and above all, the graceful mastery of adab, that blend of wit, manners, and lightly carried knowledge that marked a true gentleman. Arabic became the language of learning from Spain to India, a river of words flowing through deserts, mountains, and cities, binding distant lands with shared stories, sciences, and ideas. When Muslim forces entered Samarkand in the early 700s, they discovered something that would change the world: the Chinese art of making paper from pulped plants, a gift more powerful than gold. By 794, the first paper factory in the Islamic world opened in Baghdad, and the age of parchment and leather gave way to thin, bright sheets that could carry ideas faster, farther, and in greater numbers than ever before. Paper traveled westward through Sicily and Spain, then into Italy and France, quietly laying the foundation for the book cultures of Europe centuries before the printing press arrived. In The geographer Yacobi noted that Baghdad alone had over 100 booksellers. Their shops not only sold manuscripts, but also served as gathering places for scribes, poets, and curious minds. Many students earned their way by copying texts, and a rare manuscript could fetch a fortune. By the 10th century, autograph collectors and book lovers had become a cultural force across the Islamic world. Authors rarely profited from their work. Books were shared freely or supported by wealthy patrons, and literature, like art, was created for beauty, meaning, and memory, not for the marketplace. Mosques became not only places of prayer, but also sanctuaries of learning. Many held libraries, and some cities built public collections open to all, where a love for books was treated as an act of devotion. By the 10th century, the city of Ray needed 10 large catalogs just to list the books in its public library. While Basra's library paid stipends to scholars who came to study within its quiet walls, the traveler Yaqut once spent 3 years among the libraries of Merv and Khwarizm, gathering material for his geographical dictionary. A mission made possible by a civilization that believed knowledge was sacred. When the Mongols destroyed Baghdad in 1258, they burned not only a city, but also 36 public libraries, silencing voices that had once echoed in the corridors of learning. Private libraries were countless. Wealthy families collected books as a sign of status and spirit, and it was said that one physician refused to move to the court of Bukhara because he would need 400 camels to transport his collection. Al-Waqidi, a historian, left behind 600 crates of books, each so heavy it took 2 men to carry, while princes like Sahib ibn Abbas possessed more manuscripts than all of Christian Europe combined. From Cordoba to Samarkand, mosques trembled with the voices of scholars. The roads bustled with geographers and philosophers, and no nobleman dared claim honor unless he supported poetry, science, or art. The Arabs, sharp in wit and wide in curiosity, absorbed the cultures they encountered, and many of the greatest poets, scientists, and philosophers who wrote in Arabic were not Arab by blood, but by brilliance. Behind the scenes, generations of scholars strengthened the foundation of this literary world. They created grammars that gave the language structure, dictionaries that preserved its beauty, and anthologies that gathered its soul through encyclopedias, commentaries, and textual criticism. They preserved the memory of entire civilizations, and though we may forget their names, their work remains the backbone of what the world still reads and remembers. Among these silent architects of memory, the historians stood tallest, for without them, the golden age of Islam would be lost to time, like petals fallen before spring. The earliest among them was Muhammad ibn Ishaq, who composed a life of the Prophet that would be revised by Ibn Hisham and become one of the first great Arabic prose works to survive. Curious scholars wrote entire dictionaries of biographies, not just of kings or warriors, but of saints, jurists, calligraphers, philosophers, physicians, and even lovers, preserving the spectrum of human character. Ibn Qutayba, who lived in the 9th century, attempted what few dared, a world history that placed his own religion not as a solitary peak, but as part of a wider human journey through time. Muhammad al-Nadim created one of the greatest bibliographies ever written, a book titled Index of the Sciences. Listing nearly every Arabic work on every subject, each author judged not just by intellect, but also by virtue. So vast was Islamic literature in his time that not 1 in 1,000 of the books he recorded survives today. Yet his catalog stands as proof of a civilization that worshipped learning with unmatched devotion. The greatest historian of early Islam was Abu Ja'far Muhammad al-Tabari, a Persian scholar who, after wandering through Arabia, Syria, and Egypt, settled in Baghdad to begin the work of a lifetime. For 40 years he wrote a universal chronicle, Annals of the Apostles and Kings, tracing human history from creation to his own time, year by year, with painstaking care and reverence. Though he followed tradition and often accepted stories of miracles and legends without question, al-Tabari also recorded his sources with honesty, leaving behind a vast mountain of memory rather than a polished narrative. He believed deeply in divine purpose, writing that all things happen by God's design, and his history, like many of his age, was both a chronicle of men and a reflection on heaven's unfolding plan. After al-Tabari came his greatest successor, al-Masudi, an Arab of Baghdad who wandered across Syria, Arabia, Zanzibar, Persia, India, even claiming to have reached the China Sea. His 30-volume encyclopedia gathered the wonders of the world: geography, biology, customs, faiths, and philosophies into one sweeping vision of human experience, from China to France. When the work grew too large even for scholars, al-Masudi condensed it, and in 947 he published his masterpiece, The Meadows of Gold and Mines of Precious Stones, a book as rich in story as in substance. Al-Masudi was no cold chronicler. He wrote with leisure and delight, mixing fact with reflection, offering not just information but insight, not just records but revelations. He never mocked faith, but his writings held a gentle skepticism. He opened doors to science, entertained the idea of evolution from mineral to plant, from plant to animal, and from animal to man. Perhaps it was these ideas that forced him into exile. He left Baghdad for Cairo, mourning the separation, writing that love of one's homeland is a sign of moral strength and noble lineage. He died in Cairo in 956, far from his birthplace, yet leaving behind one of the most important historical visions the Islamic world would ever know. Broad, human, and deeply wise, historians like al-Masudi and al-Tabari saw history not just as a timeline, but as a mirror reflecting the lives, struggles, and dreams of humanity across generations and continents. Though they focused often on rulers and wars, they were also geographers of culture, mapping the ways people lived, learned, believed, and built the world around them. They did not yet ask the modern questions of economics or psychology, but their histories sang with human voices. Storytellers who believed that memory was a duty and wisdom a form of worship, they honored the chain of tradition, tracing each report through names and generations. Believing that truth could be preserved through careful testimony, even if modern minds demand sterner proof. Yes, their tales include miracles and marvels, but so do the epics of every civilization, for myth and memory often walk side by side in the search for meaning. In the West, many historians once reduced Islamic civilization to a footnote beside the Crusades, just as some in the East saw pre-Islamic history as merely a shadow. But time teaches us to see with wider eyes. The beauty of Arabic prose, like poetry, fades when translated. Yet behind every faded word lies a world of thought, passion, and precision that once lit the mosques and libraries of an entire world. Today, as we build digital archives and teach with glowing screens, we are heirs to a legacy where learning was a sacred act, where students crossed deserts for a single lecture and a scholar's ink became immortal. The library is no longer a courtyard in Baghdad, but a cloud of data. Yet the question remains the same. Will we seek knowledge with reverence or scroll past wisdom in search of noise? In a world where books can be read in seconds and forgotten in minutes, the Islamic age of scholarship reminds us that true learning takes time, humility, and purpose. Let us remember those who built the foundations: the children reciting by lantern light, the scribes copying through the night, and the historians who dreamed of recording not just what happened, but why it mattered. Thank you for watching Uncover Time. If history moves you, like, share, and subscribe for more journeys into the minds that shape the world and the knowledge that still connects us all.